Now, at the top of the show, I showed you how the Trump derangement syndrome is kicking in again, with critics suggesting that Donald Trump is undermining NATO with these comments.
One of the presidents of a big country stood up and said, well, sir, if we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us? I said, you didn't pay? You're delinquent? He said, yes, let's say that happened. No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay. You got to pay your bills.
Now, the truth is, of course, that in his own unorthodox and provocative way, Trump's trying to bolster NATO by getting the Europeans to do more, as he did when he was in office. But that reality doesn't seem to quieten the hysterical critics of Donald Trump. I started my chat with US commentator Tate on that topic.
That's exactly right. This is just more pearl clutching by people who have Trump derangement syndrome. They are constantly outraged, constantly appalled, and their constant outrage and state of being appalled has just left the voters with fatigue. So it has no impact anymore. And even just average Americans who aren't particularly plugged in understand that American taxpayers are pulling the weight of all of these countries, by the way, that simultaneously want the weight of the American military behind them at all times. And Americans are sick of it. They're saying, hey, what about our open border? How come we're giving $75 billion to Ukraine under Joe Biden, and we get a measly $4 billion for our own southern border that is wide open? People are sick of it, and the vast majority of Americans support Donald Trump and his comments about NATO.
Yeah, I love that term, pearl clutching. But you're dead right. I mean, the Trump critics don't do themselves any favours because they just wind underneath his wings. Any ordinary person, anyone with any common sense, knows exactly what he's doing there. He's saying to the NATO nations, stump up, do more for yourself. So he's not undermining NATO. He's trying to strengthen NATO. And he actually did that when he was in the White House himself. He got a lot of those countries to spend a bit more on defending themselves. So their interpretation is virtually the opposite of reality. So no wonder Joe Biden, meantime, is having a hell of a time. I couldn't help but notice the latest ABC News Ipsos poll. It shows that 86% of Americans think that Joe Biden is too old to be president. Now, granted, more than half of those think both candidates are too old, given that Donald Trump's only 4 years younger than Joe Biden. But as Joe Biden is having all sorts of trouble remembering names and remembering issues and remembering countries, and to have 86% of the population saying you're too old to get another term just underscores how dire this situation is.
What's shocking to me is not that 86% of Americans think he's too old. It's that 14% think he's not too old, Chris. Who is that 14%? I mean, it is so clear that this is a president who is well past his prime. He is losing his mental capabilities. There was a press conference a few days ago that was just so painful to watch. He's mixing up names of countries. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He stops speaking in the middle of his sentences. This has gotten so bad, Chris, that even the New York Times now, it seems, has turned on Joe Biden because they realize this is a disaster and he is clearly not capable of this. This is a quote from the New York Times, an editorial author. He, quote, simply should not be running for re-election. Another quote, this is a political disaster. This is supposed to be his biggest cheerleading outlet. The question is not at this point whether Democrat insiders want him gone. That is very obvious. They realize he's a political loser. The question is, will he willingly go? And that's a real question. He seems very committed to staying in this race. It could be an act. He could step aside, right before the convention, as you and I have talked about many times. But that's the question. The Democrat insiders, they clearly want him to be replaced.
But fear not, the president has a way to fight back. Never mind that his security apparatus says that TikTok is a security threat to the US government, that US government employees shouldn't be on TikTok. The president's joined TikTok. Have a listen to his first post.
Game or halftime show?
Game.
Jason Kelce or Travis Kelce?
Mama Kelce. I understand she makes great chocolate chip cookies.
Deviously plotting to rig the season so the Chiefs would make the Super Bowl, or the Chiefs just being a good football team?
I'd get in trouble if I told you.
Trump or Biden?
Are you kidding? Biden.
Kristen, I don't think that's going to win back the young voters.
Excuse me, Chris, I'm trying to get the permanent cringe off my face. I mean, this is just like so cringeworthy on so many levels. First of all, it does not work when you try to be something you're not, especially when you're old and you try to act young and hip. Young people can smell that from a mile away. It does not help your case at all. This will not get any young voters. And it's so clear that this was not President Biden's idea. This is, young staffers wheeling him into the room and forcing him like a prisoner, a hostage, making these videos. It's just so pathetic. And yes, to your point, TikTok is basically a Chinese spy app. Members of government certainly shouldn't be on it, nor should, in my opinion, the vast majority of young Americans who are complete zombies at this point because they sit on TikTok all day while they're being spied on by our biggest geopolitical threat. We need to get serious about TikTok and about China as a threat to this country, and to have our president making light of this and trying to pander to young voters through TikTok. I mean, it's just so cringe, so pathetic, and also sends a bad message.
Kristen, the big question is, does Joe Biden even know that he's on TikTok? We'll see. Thanks for joining us.
Guarantee
I'll catch up with you next week.